Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are watching or listening to this. And welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and as always, joined by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, was I muted during that whole thing, or did I?
No. I heard you.
Oh, okay. Good. Thank goodness. Because I looked down and I couldn't tell if I was muted because the video was playing or if I was muted the whole time. I was like, well, we've got to do it again.
No, I think we're good to go.
Awesome. How are you today?
Great. How are you?
Good. Doing very well. I'm excited.
The most important question of the day.
Oh, doing wonderful. No, I'm very excited that this is probably going to be the last podcast that we do in this setting because we're moving offices next week. So we're going to have new exciting backgrounds and things to show people. I'm just really pumped to have like a new area to do this in. Yeah, it's going to be super fun. So looking forward to some redesigning of the show and things like that. So anyway, just a little bit of teasers. So today we have with us James Kwon from ePallet. James, how are you doing this morning?
Great. How are you guys?
Good. And it's early for you, isn't it? It's like 8:30?
Oh, that's not early. Our company gets started around 6 a.m. so we can keep up with you East Coast folks.
Oh gosh, God bless you. I don't know how you do it. I would not make it. There's no way.
Yeah, when I was at our Campbell office, that was about the average. You start getting phone calls around 5:36. People on the East Coast.
Nope. No way.
Good old supply chain 24/7.
Good old supply chain. It never sleeps. That's the beauty of it, right? It's and that's all we're going to talk about today. I mean, you created this beautiful structure in supply chain, so I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about how you got started in the industry. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Oh yeah. So I'm a product and technical product guy. So been coding and developing product for over 20 years. So I had the privilege of riding multiple technology waves from the good old internet to mobile and social, and built a lot of neat products. And around 5 years ago, I was looking around for an opportunity to really apply what we called back then AI. And I got introduced to my co-founders who come from the food industry. So they've been living all the pain points of the supply chain in that particular vertical for over 30 years. And as we got speaking, we're like, oh my gosh, it's there's an opportunity here for us to really level the playing ground, make it really efficient for the manufacturers to sell, especially in pallet quantities. And same thing on the wholesale buyer experience, to be able to buy in pallet quantities without all the friction points. So, when I first got introduced to this vertical, I'm like, wow, it's as if the internet bypassed them completely. And it feels like a lot of the way that most people have to buy and sell feels like it's very, high friction, very inefficient, very opaque. So that's what ePallet is here to fix.
And what does a pallet quantity mean? Because I hear pallet and I think of like wood pallets that are repurposed into like, I don't know.
Bars.
Yeah. Well, that or like we have a new team member, Jack, his girlfriend made like a flower wall out of a pallet, like a wood pallet. That's what I think of. So what does it actually mean?
That's a great question. In fact, my daughter, I think when she had her birthday party, she had all these pallets set up for tables in the backyard. Yes. So that's exactly what most people think about. And in fact, we get calls all the time asking if we sell pallets of, wood pallets or plastic pallets. So pallet quantity is if you've gone to your favorite club store and you see that giant stack of tuna or cereal, that's our minimum quantity. So that usually represents around 700 to 2,500 pounds of product.
Wow.
Yeah. So our customers are wholesale customers, institutional customers who are going through a pallet of rice, oil, whatever product that might be.
Gotcha. And so pallet quantity is kind of like an amoebic term though, right? Because like a pallet of canned tuna, just like you said, is going to be different than a pallet of cereal boxes because their different volume each unit. So
yeah. It's just a shorthand. I mean, in reality, we'll be selling in cases or pounds, like most people. We just use it as a shorthand, and hence our name.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's great brand awareness. But backing up a little bit to your prior experience, did you have any experience in supply chain before meeting your now partner?
Absolutely not. I'm still astounded by how a product can go from one location and actually show up at your local grocery store. It's just the number of failure points and the amount of coordination that is required to make things happen. It's just astounding. I think all of us kind of saw the empty shelves during this pandemic, but I'm really proud of our industry. We stepped up and we really took care of a lot of once in a lifetime kind of change. So
I've never heard the word supply chain more in the news, out of people's mouths that have nothing to do with supply chain than I did in 2020. Yes. And it always was correlated to toilet paper or paper towels, or sometimes they would just toss around the term loosely. And it's exciting to know what goes on behind the scenes, because it is so much more intricate than just saying supply chain. It's not, hey, we're just going to drive it across the street to the local grocery store for you to buy. But I'm very curious, what did your partner describe to you as, this antiquated supply chain at that time?
Yeah, so essentially on the manufacturer side, that it's easier for them to focus and profitable for them to focus on truckloads, because selling a pallet is as much work or probably more work for them than it is selling a full truckload. So why even focus on those? Hence, we have a current supply chain where if you're interested in buying pallet quantities, you would have to go through a redistributor, distributor, wholesalers. There's probably 10 other category of people out there that you have to go through. But obviously, because each of these businesses have their business model and fixed costs, every time somebody touches it, as it gets down to the actual customer, it tends to add cost. So even if you're super efficient, and I don't know how you would make a business work at 15%, but if you are able to, God bless you. But unfortunately, you have to pass that cost on. So most product, by the time it gets to our type of customer, it's been touched minimum of 2 times, which represents anywhere from 30, let's just say 20 to 40% additional cost. And then on top of that, the other pain point is a lot of these manufacturers really don't have visibility into who they're actually selling to and how much they're selling it. So there's that opaqueness and lack of control that a lot of manufacturers have right now. And lastly, you don't have that brand control, and you tend to kind of almost have to fight against your own supply chain partners in selling your product, because you can be disintermediated or switched for a different type of product. So that's a challenge. On the customer side, oh gosh, when I say it's as if the internet bypassed them completely. Let me walk you through a typical customer journey that I see. Yes. Right? So let's all put on our wholesaler hat or wholesale customer hat. Okay. So let's just say we're all interested in buying peaches. So we're gonna go and search, in our yellow pages, internet, Google. We're gonna find all these suppliers that are out there. We're gonna call, email, fax, carrier pigeon to get their attention, and hopefully get product information. And all the product information that a typical professional buyer needs doesn't reside in one place at a manufacturer. It tends to be very siloed. So you need to speak with several different people. So multiple times you have to call in and get to the right person to get the information you need. once you've done that, you get the joy of negotiating on pricing. And then you're like, okay, well, this supplier A is going to sell it to me for $10 a case. This one's going to be $11 and so forth and so on. And then you have to figure out how you can get that product to you. And we all know how efficient or challenging it can be to do LTL freight or less than truckload freight. So, and I wish the freight market was very rational and transparent, but it isn't. The pricing can fluctuate, right? It's like booking airline tickets for us. 1 second it's $100, other second it's $1,000, right? Yeah. It can be all over the place, and that's kind of what the carrier market is out there right now. Mm-hmm. So as you can see, as a wholesale buyer, you're having to go through a lot of different friction points to get to just being able to buy. So you figured out freight, you figured out how much the product is going to cost, but then, the supplier A that you thought was the right deal is no longer the right deal because it costs so much to bring the product to you. Hmm. So what ePallet looked at this buyer journey and said, you know what, for the buyer, we're just going to make it as easy as buying on a modern e-commerce site. You have all the prices, delivered prices in real time, so you can compare truly peaches to peaches and get that product to you, and you have all the information you need at your fingertips. And for the manufacturer, they have full transparency. They know exactly who they're selling to, at what price, so they gain that control back.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And
there are a lot of. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and who's buying pallets of peaches? Because like you said, like I see pallets at Costco, BJ, Sam's Club, things like that, but I feel like I don't see it anywhere else. But I'm sure they take it off the pallet before they need it. But I'm sure Costco isn't just buying like pallet per pallet of peaches. It's like who?
Who's buying all this stuff? So our customers tend to, we have customers in almost every vertical that you can think of, from hospitality to kitchens, meaning food service, fast casual, education, so K through 12, universities, colleges.
Okay.
Food pantries, food banks as well. So as you can imagine, just flashing back to 2020 doesn't seem like that long ago, but also feels like it was long ago. I think we all lived like 7 years in 2020. So during that period when the supply chain dried up for all these charities and their demand went up through the roof, they definitely needed a way to access product. And ePallet was able to do that because we have a really wide variety of manufacturers. So instead of having just one brand that you will normally see at your favorite club store, we have 100 different brands, right, of that same product. So that's something that we did. But essentially we service anyone who can buy in pallet quantities, and it could be your local Chinese restaurant, and we do have quite a few of those guys as well. And we have large campuses and large customers who purchase, in billions of dollars.
Wow.
There are a lot of touch points. And I think one thing that, particularly when you start to get down to maybe the vendors or the smaller restaurants, I've seen firsthand with my uncle's restaurant, for example, trying to go direct to manufacturers. And there's levels to this, right? There's levels to the entire supply chain. Can you break down what some of those different, and for every different product, there are going to be different tiers, right? I mean, but can you break down what a standard, I guess, upstream supply chain looks like from a customer to that manufacturer? And it could be an example of any product.
Yeah, let's try working through your, did you say uncle's restaurant?
Yeah.
So number one, most likely your uncle would not be able to buy from the manufacturer, period. Right? Like I mentioned in the beginning, manufacturers are not interested, even though your uncle might be buying a couple pallets of items. Just unfortunately too small, right? And that's okay, and that's the way it should be. So typically a local restaurant in your neighborhood would be buying from a distributor. Okay, and then that distributor will be coming by the restaurant every week, or maybe 2 or 3 times a week.
And is that like US Foods?
Sure, US
Okay.
Foods, Cisco, which are also our customers, and those guys
Okay.
purchase usually from a redistributor who purchases from the manufacturer in truckload. So the truckload goes from the manufacturer to a redistributor. Redistributor will then send cases or pallet quantity to your local distributor. And then your local distributor will then take one case off that pallet and then send it to the restaurant. So that's
Got it.
typical supply chain. And the reason Cisco and US Food buys from us is because we tend to be more efficient than the local or the larger redistributors out there, because our business model is super efficient. We have a lot of technology on automation that reduces costs. And so we're able to get product to either the distributor or maybe your uncle pretty efficiently.
Yeah. No, it's and that itself, like you said, has a lot of touch points, and every stage of that has its costs. So when I was looking at ePallet, and obviously through the efficiencies of technology, it looks like it helps reduce a lot of those inefficiencies. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We looked at every single touch point. We're like, okay, how do we drive efficiency and drive out costs as much as possible? So we have a very lean model. And on top of that, we've looked at the technology stack and we're like, okay, why does this cost so much? Why is there this particular fee for this particular transaction or touch point? And we're like, okay, is there anything that we can do technology-wise to drive that cost down? And we've been able to do that, and we're continuing to refine that process.
I mean, it seems like there would have a lot of applications when it comes to technology that could streamline this supply chain in particular, but any supply chain. Because I mean, the supply chain itself is so it's in this very antiquated model where it's reliant on emails, and if you're doing international, you might be relying on WeChat or WhatsApp, and particularly when you're working with foods. So a few years back, I was working with for pulp. Actually, it was orange pulp and a few other types of pulp, and that has a lot of seasonality to it. Like very specific seasons that you could get to, and you had to work with redistributors, and redistributors had that, and that's why I wanted to pry a little bit more into those different tiers and levels, because the customers that we had, they didn't understand what those levels were. Particularly, they were in different types of industries where you could work directly with manufacturers because there are smaller manufacturers. But it was very reliant on emails and WhatsApps and very late phone calls. What do you do to streamline that process? Because that is still an important relationship piece of the process.
It is, but we wonder, we don't want to get in the way of the relationship. But we wonder if for the purpose of driving efficiency and driving the most transparency and reducing costs, we wonder if a dashboard, more of a tech platform approach, is the way to do it. So in that scenario of a small foreign manufacturer who normally had to field inquiries through another kind of a marketplace like Alibaba or WeChat or whatever it might be, we do all of that on ePallet. So we recognize that most wholesale customers will have the same set of questions, right? They actually need 200 data points, let's just say, to make a buying decision. Let's get that all onto ePallet, make sure all of that's available, all the certificates, documents, is it really non-GMO, what's the certificate of the manufacturing plant, all of that good stuff. Let's get that on the platform. The manufacturer still has control over who sees it, so they can have it so it's only available on demand. So they can kind of vet who sees their documents. But let's have everything up so that there's no need to go back and forth, okay? So let's do the work once and do it really well and make it really clean. And then for the wholesale buyer, it's hey, you know what? You've answered all my questions. I know what the price is. Perfect. What else do I need to do? Right? Maybe I'll call you up or friend you on Insta, and that's the relationship.
Yeah. And we've said the word wholesale a lot, and I think for putting my consumer hat on, a wholesale, the word itself has really been skewed by these larger corporations and very respectable corporations like Costco and BJ's um, but would you mind defining exactly what wholesale means? Because I think a lot of people have different interpretations, but there's one specific interpretation that actually is, it has to do a lot with what, wholesale is.
Yeah, and hopefully I'm answering this correctly.
Okay.
So our definition of wholesale, so we look at it in a couple different ways. One is from a price point. Is it Unfortunately, there's many layers to the pricing, even in wholesale. So it's very akin to a consumer who goes and buys a car and it comes out and says, "Oh, you know what? I got a killer deal because I paid invoice." Now, we all know as sophisticated consumers that paying invoice on your car is not a great deal. All right, because there's a lot of layers to that pricing. Same thing in the wholesale market, and there's all these bill backs, dealer incentives, and all of this stuff that's on the back end. So that's what you want to really get to. So the way we at ePallet, the way we define wholesale is, if we took out all that funny money, all right, and really got to net pricing, that's what we define as wholesale from a pricing standpoint. On the customer, it's somebody who is an end user, but not necessarily at a consumer level. So it could be your local university. They're buying the food and they're cooking it in their cafeteria. Ultimately, the students or the parents are paying for that food, and it's at that retail price there. But for us, it's important that we reduce the pricing as much as we can to that university, because really, the why behind ePallet is we believe that everyone should have access to quality, affordable product. But the current supply chain is just inefficient, and we think that we can have an impact on a global basis on everyone, down to that consumer level.
And so for your wholesale model, do you require that they also Costco, when it first started, what a lot of people don't know is that they require that they either be government agencies or a government employee or a business that can prove with a business license or an EIN. Do you require any of these in order to work with you as a wholesaler?
Yes. So you do need a EIN at least, and then the manufacturer can have full control over different customer segments. So if they decide, for universities or charities, I'm going to offer this particular pricing and these type of product, then we'll allow them to do that. And that's, within their overall corporate vision, corporate strategy, and maybe CSR, right? So we want to empower manufacturers to be able to do that. But yeah, we definitely don't want to be selling to the average consumer or maybe a trader that's out there that's just fly by night. And we try to control that as much as possible.
And what challenges have you faced since starting ePallet? And I don't mean since launching the platform, but when you first started, I guess, putting all of this together, were there any specific challenges that you encountered with the customers or friction points that you had to solve? And the reason I ask this, I have a cousin that's in the distribution aspect of I believe it's US Foods or one of those. And he's told me a lot of very interesting requests by his customers, very late requests, and the phone calls at 3 a.m. because they don't have certain shrimp in their store or their restaurants. I guess it's tough. It's a tough industry.
I know that I've done that before too. In the events time, it's like, I'm out of what? I need it now. Get it? I need that.
So what friction points did you encounter, I guess, with your customers?
Yeah, boy, it's been a learning lesson, as you can imagine, in anything in life, as well as building a platform, a new business. I think the most surprising friction point from a customer standpoint is they are used to doing the things in a very analog way. So we thought, hey, we have this fancy, easy way to buy, and it'll be an instant hit. And it took a little convincing, right? So you're like, oh, there is a better way. Certainly, there's a whole bunch of customers who are like, oh, wow, I see it. They get it instantly. But it was quite surprising to me that people kind of hung on to the traditional way of doing business. So that's surprising. And we're working that through, I think it's just a matter of time, right? I think there was a time when very few of us did online banking. So, we have a lot of different examples like that. So we figure we're just kind of going through that customer life cycle.
Yeah, I think we're a little akin in that the sourcing process has been the same way for a very long time, and Noviland offers a streamlined, different way of doing it that's easier. And some folks are like, this is too good to be true. This can't work. It's like, it does work. It does.
We're not the only ones that hears that all the time. Right?
I was going to say, when you were first describing ePallet to us, that's exactly what I thought. I thought of our customers that say that it's too good to be true. And now I'm sitting here thinking, this has to be too good to be true. But I mean, everything that you say makes sense, particularly when it comes to technology. So how can someone that has been doing business like this for the traditional way for a long time, what does the transition look like using a technology like ePallet?
Yeah, certainly you can imagine it varies from individual to individual. So we try to make it as easy as possible. So if you're a typical buyer and you use spreadsheets and that's how you put in your orders, we'll take that and we'll consume it, and we'll generate that order for you. If you want a more consumer type of experience, then the ePallet platform is perfect for that. If you're more sophisticated and you have an EDI system, an inventory system, or maybe an API integrated inventory system, then we'll tap into that as well. So you can have auto replenishment. You can just do it from your procurement program, or maybe something in between, like you manage your inventory through your warehouse management system. Fine, we'll integrate it in with that, and we can generate that for you.
And then, what level of personal service, I guess, does ePallet provide its customers? And I don't mean to get into the nitty gritty here, but I think it is important that a lot of these questions that maybe more traditional customers don't know about, or those that are just in the industry, really, they have these questions too. And they just say, hey, why change anything when I'm doing business as usual and my supply chain is perfect because I'm getting it from my distributor down the street?
Right. But the deep, dark secret is nobody really likes the way the business is done. Certainly it's easy, right? It's easy because learning something new or doing something different is harder. But the reality is, if you really dive into it, do they really think they're getting the best selection and pricing and efficiency? Not really. And that goes both on the sell side and the buy side. So that's something we just have to really click into and have them see that bigger picture of, you know what, if I can save a little bit here. I can be more efficient. So if you're your uncle, you only have 3 different ways you can control pricing, right? So, or your costs or structure is food cost, labor cost, and your fixed cost, right? So that's it. You can only do so much on labor. Your landlord kind of controls everything else, and your insurance company. So really the only area for you to dial in on is on that food cost. So hey, so we really try to get behind the why of our customers. And if you are trying to be the best restaurant or the best, university or food bank, then we want to empower them and put every dollar to work towards their mission.
Yeah, and I think particularly during COVID, there was a lack in supply chain technology to empower businesses to really overcome these hurdles, because I think no one has to hear this again, but last year was a huge hurdle for a lot of businesses. How did you see your customers be impacted by COVID? Because a lot of restaurants obviously were closed down. A lot of businesses in other sectors, let's say, smaller vendors, they might have increased. But I'm curious to see sort of your perspective of how you saw them change over time.
Yeah, challenging year for all of us, and I think we're all kind of individually and as a nation and as a world, we're all still feeling these pain points. And I think, unfortunately, just reading the news from overseas, the angst is continuing. So definitely feel for everyone out there. We saw a tremendous change over last year. The food service companies, all these restaurants, restaurant chains, that were good customers of ours. We saw them kind of going through that wobble in the first couple of months of the pandemic, and they've had to kind of shutter and clamp down, and that's certainly challenging. We see that, and that had a ripple effect across the supply chain, right? So up to your wholesaler, distributor, redistributor, and so forth. At the same time, we had customers who switched their business model. So we had K through 12 companies who normally made your kids' school lunch, and they quickly pivoted and created these take-home boxes. It really became a food source for their local community. And when they, we proudly partnered up with those guys, and when they had to go from their traditional suppliers to suppliers they didn't know, we were able to really take care of them. And when we did comparison on how much more efficient we were saving these guys 20% on the same exact item. So that was really, I think, meaningful for the team that we were able to take care of folks that way. So we saw that, and then as I mentioned, like some of the charities out there, like Meals on Wheels, their demand, boy, just shot through the roof.
Oh God, I'm sure.
Yeah. So when literally you cannot find product, we were able to get product because of our very diverse vendor or manufacturer line. So that's been interesting to see. And then, of course, as things are kind of coming back to normal, and hopefully we can stop saying that word.
Right?
The C word. Yeah.
We're definitely seeing people who've had kind of have the battle scars and looking at kind of creating some more efficiencies, because they just don't have the resources they used to have to be able to buy from their local supply chain or traditional supply chain. And so I think hopefully we bring value to that.
Go ahead.
So and this may be a little off topic, but I'm thinking about, how you guys are getting all these people this food and like everything that's going on in logistics and the international supply chain. And am I naive? I hope I'm not, in thinking that the majority of like the food products that you're selling through ePallet, and really that just like we buy in the stores, Am I naive in thinking that those are mostly like produced and made here in the US? I mean, I know like you see like bananas from Peru comes to mind, but like, I know that some of the produce and stuff is filled in, but you see the Honey Bunches of Oats cereal commercial and she's in Nebraska somewhere. Like, is a lot of that stuff already here in the US?
Good point. I think, in some ways, certainly US is still the number one producer of lots of food product, right? And California, as you know, it's another key supplier. But what we noticed is that there are many components to that food. So from packaging to the can to the label, even though the food might be in the United States, that can probably comes from overseas, and that label comes from overseas, and we saw constraints there. So I think we really live in a global market, and different components come from different parts of the world, and so especially if you're looking at like a finished product, meaning I don't know, one of my favorite foods is like a sausage. There's a lot to that sausage, and that spice or whatever could be coming from Italy. So I think we really need to look at this as one world.
And I didn't even think, and I should have, having been here for so long now, I didn't even think about like how the packaging is probably coming from somewhere else. But that makes sense why a lot of these brands during COVID and everything that's been going on decided to kind of scale back some of their product offerings and not having every flavor, every scent, or every variation of an item available. They just said, hey, we're going to focus on these key pieces. That makes a lot more sense to me now, for sure.
What disruptions, if any, are you seeing nowadays because of the residual effects of COVID?
Yeah, it continues to cascade. So I was hoping that we heard the end of shortages in product like toilet paper and hand sanitizers and stuff like that. So I'm sure you've read that anything that's coming from overseas, because the demand has picked up and there's so much backlog at the ports, and we've all read about and saw what happened in Suez Canal. So what you're seeing is a long delay there, and then as the market is really heating up, you're seeing additional costs. So even though you might see product that your favorite product at your local market, we're going to see some inflation there because there's going to be costs. Most of us take for granted, I don't know, I'm a big bargain shopper, so like 50% off, you got me. You're singing my song. But and as consumers, I think we're used to these large percentage offs. But we have to realize, in the food, the markets, the margins are super thin. It's razor thin. So 1%, 5% is a huge difference. So unfortunately, we are going to see some increases there. So toilet paper, I think, will continue to be an issue, unfortunately. And coffee. So if you want to stock up on your coffee, I recommend that.
Okay. So, because I had a question about the toilet paper, because my dad had said something about how the toilet paper shortage is going to, for fear of freaking anybody out, but that it was going to come back like it had been before because of something about the major pulp producer, because there weren't any containers to get it out of, and I forget the country he said now, it escapes me, but because they can't get the pulp out for it to actually be made into toilet paper.
Exactly. Yeah. The supply chain goes all the way back to the tree in that particular situation. And with lumber prices going up through the roof because of all the demand for housing, you have, it's just a knock-on effect, right? So we're so entwined. And so unfortunately, please don't freak out. There's plenty, right? All we have to do is just buy one. And
just get what you need.
Exactly.
Good God. Well, what's up with coffee? Okay, that's a whole off-camera conversation we can have about the days. Yes. Oh boy, I've got thoughts.
Yeah, coffee is just the fact that there's such a backlog on the supply chain, and it's so weather dependent. And this year has been the best weather globally, so you have reduced supply there, and then constraints on shipping. And then the increases on prices. So if you have any friends who are doing container shipping overseas, the prices are crazy right now. So yeah,
we're seeing those triple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that just means that, we have suppliers who are trying to get product out, and literally it's a 3-month delay. And some of this product cannot sit in a container for 3 months. So.
Yeah. It's not like buying like I don't know why iPhone comes to mind. Those don't sit around for that long, but it's not like buying like a plastic like shaker tin or anything. Like it goes bad. It has an expiration date. Like
exactly. Yeah. Challenging.
So domestically here in the US, because I know that this was a problem probably about 12 months ago, and I haven't looked into it, but are we still having a shortage of truck drivers?
Yes. So, we have the perfect storm. So we had the regulations that kind of reduced the number of truck drivers out there. And then doing, truck driving is a hard life.
Yeah.
Kudos to those guys who make the sacrifice. Especially those interstate guys who are away from their families and friends. That's a difficult way to make a living. And I think, for better or worse, I think the current generation is just not very open to that kind of lifestyle. So that's challenging. So we're seeing that. And then, all this pent up demand. So as you know, from a consumer spending perspective, we all kind of shifted to more durable goods, if I can call it that, and purchases. And we all hunkered down, but really the purchasing continued for a while. And we saw some earnings this week, which represents that. So
triple the quarterly reported earnings, I think, from Amazon, right?
Yeah, so lots of spending
Jesus
there. Yeah, so all the money that we're saving from going out to restaurants and buying foods have definitely shifted, and it's more in-home food and stuff like that. So anyway, back to the truck drivers. Unfortunately, we have this combination of reduced supply of drivers, increase of demand, and then just as more of the states are opening up, we're seeing this giant peak. That I honestly don't see us coming out of for a few months, if we're lucky. So so if you're looking for a different career, folks,
you'll be a truck driver.
Yeah, there you go.
Supply chain in general, I think, is a industry that very much is slept on, and a lot of those that I speak to see it as very boring because we work with a lot of the e-commerce side of things. And that's, I guess, sort of the space that you're also in a different sense than, an Amazon seller, but still sort of in this online space. But they see more of the advertising and the marketing. That is the sexy side, right? Not the, hey, we have a lack of truck drivers, not the, hey, we have a global container shortage or that the prices are going up. That's a lot more boring to them. So, I mean, I would recommend anyone that wants a guaranteed job. Supply chain is a tremendous industry that can be incorporated into any business. How is ePallet handling this increased demand, I guess, when it comes to, or is ePallet even being affected by this increased demand to online shopping?
Yeah, in some ways we are, in some ways we aren't. So our prototypical customer tends to be very traditional. So that's going to be a kind of a learning behavior change process for them. As new generation is becoming buyers, I think we're seeing them kind of demand the type of experience they get on a typical e-commerce site. They're demanding that kind of ease and transparency. So we definitely want to capture those folks. And if I can touch on the whole pitch for a career at supply chain, I would say, hey, you know what? There's a lot of innovation and impact you can have, and a lot of creativity as well. Yeah, there's, security's one. I definitely don't want to negate that, but we need new thought leaders and new ways of looking at things. So definitely welcome everybody who would not have normally thought of, but want to have an impact, because you will have an impact. Everyone in this world eats, uses stuff. So if you want to have an impact in that way, you can definitely pursue this.
Definitely.
And what do you think's next for supply chain? What is this next step for it?
Gosh, a lot more automation, a lot more traceability. We've seen a lot of these things with NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Same concept. It's nothing new here, but we've all, as an industry, talked about how do we prove that this milk is truly organic and came from this cow in this environment. And I think we're going to get that. And that's really exciting to see that full supply chain transparency, and that local suppliers, do we really, let's see, is the local supplier, there's a lot of value to that, but from a like an environmental impact perspective, sometimes scale is a good thing, so even though we're moving it across the country, overall carbon footprint might be less, right? So we got to really look at it in a holistic sense, right? It's not that whole internal combustion engine versus electric, right? Like, what is the true carbon footprint for this entire thing, right? So I think looking at that, talking about truck drivers, gosh, if these autonomous vehicles are out there, that could be a huge thing. If we look at the input cost of typical over the road OTR rates, we know what the input costs are, and labor is a good component of that, and as well as insurance. I wonder if autonomous vehicles can drive that down, and that can have a real knock-on effect. So lots of interesting things out there. And I think on the global trade part, leveraging more of the cryptocurrencies and stuff like that to really drive down transaction costs as well as currency risk. I think those are all neat things, and we're all looking forward to that.
Oh, maybe not all of us. I'm not on team crypto yet. I don't get it. I also don't understand what NFTs are. I had somebody try to explain them to me the other day, and I was like, so it's a GIF? I don't get it.
It can be anything, right? It doesn't have to be animated. So any digital component, you're just inserting essentially cryptocurrency into it, so that it's proof that this particular version of your digital asset is actually, you're putting a serial number on it, and it's unique. So you can do an NFT for this podcast. Yeah, neat stuff.
Yeah, it's like assigning it a SKU, I guess.
Yeah,
but that SKU can't be repeated. It's just for that one product.
Interesting.
Going back to something you mentioned, because I've had this conversation with a few other thought leaders in the space, and I think a lot of times the only topic that gets brought up with automation, or the first thought that comes to mind when it comes to automation, is just in manufacturing. And then the next question is typically, well, what happens to everyone that automation sort of gets rid of, right? What levels of automation do you think would help the supply chain, or where could automation help the supply chain, aside from just the manufacturing aspect?
Yeah. So, if you haven't picked up on it, I'm a bit of a geek. So I'm totally into chess and all, everything geeky. I think I would kind of look at the chess model. right? So we had Big Blue playing chess against, the grandmasters. But to see the evolution of that, and right now we're looking at a human supercomputer match, or teams of humans and supercomputer match, who are outperforming everything that's out there, be it computer or a grandmaster. And I think that's a really great model to kind of emulate that. Yeah, you know what? Computers are getting better, but there's little children, right? And human beings are really great, but we get bored and we lose attention to detail, and we don't see the forest, through the leaves, or whatever the cliche is. And I think this model of this hybrid is really exciting, and that's kind of the model that we pursue. Is, can we create kind of the machine learning ML that will alert the users, so that they don't have to get bored or they miss out on a detail, and they can really focus on the value add. And I think that's exciting. And then, gosh, I think we need probably like 10 other podcasts to talk about the economy of, of change. And I think much smarter folks than me have penned a lot of great books and articles on the impact of technology change. I'm a forever optimist. So I think we will elevate and focus on bigger and better things as human beings. And I think machines will add value, not necessarily take things away.
Do you have any book recommendations?
You know what? I will have to send it to you. One of my weaknesses is names. Right, I
Gotcha.
don't know names at all, and that's why, as a team, we have a reading list that we all share. So I'll be happy to share. There's actually a couple that is perfect on this topic. So
perfect. Yes, please send that over.
Of course.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And I think that was the more traditional fear, right? That one day a computer will be able to beat a grandmaster, and today that's kind of behind us, isn't it? And we have to figure out a way to work with both, and that's exciting. Both, I think, on all fronts, particularly when it comes to all of us moving towards how much can we save. And just like you said, you're sort of this budget buyer, or you see the 50% off, you take it. I think that's what machines and AI and ML are all going to be able to bring to the table. They are going to be able to create those savings, just like ePallet is sort of doing in this space when it comes to purchasing in larger volumes. Which I'm definitely going to check out more of after this because it's a very cool concept. My uncle sold his restaurant a few years back, but I would recommend it to him because there were a lot of inefficiencies where he couldn't get a hold of his local distributors. So it's an exciting concept. I'm glad that you brought something like this to the market. I'm glad that you met your partner when you did, and you guys had the conversation that you had.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, go ahead and just give folks a quick little plug of ePallet. Just give us a little quick summary where they can find more information if they have questions for you.
Yeah. So we're available at ePallet, EPALLET. Oh, right there, down below. And if you're looking for an efficient, just easier, more transparent way of selling or buying, especially in pallet quantities, then look us up. I think we can help. We've helped a lot of folks, and we look forward to any pain points you might have. Feel free to reach out to us. We're always interested in learning about how we can add value to the way you do business.
And we talked a lot about food today, but you guys don't just do food, right? Like I saw like hand sanitizer and stuff on there.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. So our main focus is around consumables. Obviously, a lot of emphasis on food just because of the whole pandemic and the fact that my co-founders come from the food industry. But we're really focusing on the consumables. And what's interesting is, people who sell what I would consider a little bit of more of a durable goods still have the same kind of pain point. So who knows how we're going to continue to reach out. But the consumable market is a multi-trillion-dollar marketplace. So $1 trillion marketplace at a time.
Well, we will definitely have to have you on again, James. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, as well as to everybody out there listening. If you liked what you heard today, please be sure to like, subscribe, share with your network, rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts so that we can continue to bring more insights and actionable tips and tricks from leaders in supply chain and e-commerce, just like James Kwon here from ePallet. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.